Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Council Cabinet meeting of Wednesday, the 12th of November. First of all, do we have any apologies, Craig?
Just apologies from Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much. Any late items?
No late items, Chair.
Receipt of petitions?
None.
Identification of urgent items to which call-in will not apply?
None.
Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, thank you very much. Indicated no. And item 6 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of October 2025. Are we all agreed that they're an accurate reflection of the meeting? Thank you very much. And item 7 is recommendations from Executive Scrutiny Board, which, as usual, I will take basis by basis along with the key decisions, which moves us straight on to item 8, Emergency Accommodation Framework Procurement and Compliance. Over to you, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. Well, basically, this is just a report seeking for approval to start a new, or rather reprocure a new framework for the provision of emergency accommodation. I won't read the total report, but it's a figure of 64 million over 8 years. We're seeking delegated approval, basically, to agree the contract terms and to enter into the contract to Strategic Director of Place in consultation with Cabinet Member and Director of Corporate Governance. The current framework was for 3 years, which was then extended for another year and expires on the 30th of this month. The new framework will be in place by April 26, so there will be 4 months where we will have no contract in place, but we will continue to work with current providers. We are required to provide emergency accommodation as part of our statutory duty to people who are assessed to be homeless. The options team will be the main user of the framework, but it will also be used by early help and children's social care teams as well. The framework will be for no longer than 8 years to allow for long-term planning, but it can be reduced if we need to. But it's better to have a figure in place now rather than try to extend it later on. I think we all know the demand outstrips the supply at the moment in terms of the available accommodation, low turnover of social housing, obviously, and which rises private sector rents. Pre-market testing is already done on that, with 41 providers indicating that there is interest in the scheme once we've completed our procurement framework. All new providers will have to comply with the minimum housing standards, which, as you know, I've been championing on in terms of the size and the sort of quality of that. So they will have to adhere to that. The new framework will be delivered in 2 phases, and work will to try and stream the costs and will drive them down as much as possible. Work will also continue on other initiatives to increase the number of temporary accommodations and affordable homes. As you know, we converted Abbey Lodge into that. We're looking at other things to make sure that the least number of people possible are in temporary accommodation, which is not just a matter of cost, it's a matter of quality of life for them, both financially, physically, and mentally. So from the scrutiny meeting, there were no recommendations, but Councillor Kerr asked if we knew what our neighbour councils were doing in terms of their emergency, but they're doing a similar thing to us. I think Nottingham City Council, they have 7 years, we're going for 8 years. So there is basically reprocurement, better terms, better conditions that we've added for our residents. So I recommend it for approval.
Thank you very much, Councillor Khan. Are there any questions from Cabinet? Councillor Hazelgrave.
Not a question, but certainly really pleased that this is coming through to support people who very often, beyond circumstances which they had control of, they end up homeless with their family. and become extremely vulnerable. And it's really good to see that the framework, the new framework, will give council more control in terms of the quality of the accommodation, and it provides a positive impact for this vulnerable cohort. It also reduces the risk of additional issues which being homeless arises, such as violence and poor health, social isolation and emotional distress. So I think those things really are something that's really contributory to an inclusive city that looks after the most vulnerable in a very humane way, and really good as well that the standard of the accommodation will be such a good standard, and the thermal efficiency standard will be a target of EPC A or B, which makes it extremely efficient, with provision of solar panels and air pumps and all that kind of thing. So really green, but also warm homes at a really low cost, well, compared to ones which don't have those facilities. So I think this is a really good framework, and I wish it every success and every speed in delivery.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from Cabinet members? No. Okay, thank you. And over to you, Councillor Kerr. Do you have a question?
I do. This is something which I think the report explains well, is not just a Derby issue, it's a national issue. And the underlying problem is people not moving on from social housing to something else. And I just wondered if we were aware of any research going on as to why people are not moving on from social housing. Why has that movement stopped? Because if we don't address the cause of the problem, if we are able to address the cause of the problem, it might make things easier for everybody. So if there's any research into that, I'd be interested to know.
I'd be interested to know as well if there's any research into that, but my instinctive response, Councillor Kerr, is that, first of all, there isn't enough social housing. It's not just about people not moving on, there just isn't enough. You know, we have 10,000 on our waiting list and no houses for them. So it's not a case of people moving on, it's the case of them not being there in the first place. And as for people not moving on, again, instinctively, my response would be that they can't afford to. The cost of living these days just makes it absolutely impossible to move on to private accommodation or to buying their own homes. And that's just coming, you know, from someone who has, you know, we've all got lived experience of this kind of thing. It's, you know, that's nothing political. It's just, that's the shocking state of this, you know, this country, and it's. But I will hand over for a more professional response from Karen, who's indicated that she'd like to respond.
Thank you, Chair. We do actually record the statistics, and we do have the evidence that shows that the turnover of the housing has actually significantly dropped, and that, like you say, that is a nationwide, and we've got those stats across a variety of local authorities. So we do have that evidence that it is nationwide. We've also, it shows as well, it's not just the council-owned stock, it's also our housing association partners within the city. Their turnover is also dropped as well. So we do actually have that statistical evidence.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Khan, you've indicated.
Yeah, just very quickly, Chair. Obviously, you outlined all the reasons why people aren't, moving out of social housing, because, there's a difference of about 20-30% in terms of the rent from private sector. But I mean, Lucy should know, being on Vice Chair of Derby Homes, that there's approximately 8,500 people waiting, for social housing. And in the current situation, even the private, accommodation is not available because of people just on the waiting list. So I have no, or rather I'm not surprised at all that, people aren't moving out of social housing because they can't afford to buy and they can't afford to rent privately.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. And I said I wasn't coming at that from a political stance, but ultimately 14 years of austerity have put us where we are today, so you can't dig out of that easily. However, this paper really looks to the current problem of temporary accommodation, which is on the rise for all the same reasons. People can't afford to live in their own homes anymore. And so it's vital that we keep our costs down by keeping control of the temporary accommodation, providing as much of it as possible. However, while this paper does address the transition from emergency accommodation into temporary accommodation, we still have to address the complications and the challenges of moving on people from temporary accommodation to their next stage. Because if we can't build council houses fast enough, then where are the people moving to? So we have challenges yet to face, but we are very well aware of them. So thank you for that. I will just go to the Exec Scrutiny Board recommendations, which was resolved to note the report. Can I ask Cabinet if they support recommendations 2.1 to 2.3? Thank you. So item 9 is delegation to approve affordable housing schemes. Speaking of which, Councillor Khan again.
Thank you, Chair. Really, this is just the report seeks to renew a delegated approval for affordable housing schemes for a further 3 years. Delegation was originally granted by Cabinet in August 2021, with a further approval for an extension for 3 years. The report seeks delegation for a strategic director of place in consultation of Director of Finance and Cabinet Member for Housing and Property and Regulatory. The report is seeking to approve the affordable housing acquisitions or developments up to a cost of 3 million. Now, previously it was 2.5 million, but with the inflation, cost of materials, building materials, that is, we're moving it up to 3 million, which saves us time and officer time as well in terms of them coming back to ask us for, 100,000 extra or whatever, and consequently possibility of losing the acquisition or even indeed delaying all the relevant requirements. The cost variation, as I said, is only 0.5 million over the 3 years. All necessary agreements are there. Report seeks for new homes to be incorporated within the housing stock, obviously managed by Derby Homes. It also seeks approval of the updated HRA, Housing Revenue Account Board's terms or references. And I believe there is a recommendation from Scrutiny, and which they've asked, I think you can address, or would you like me to address it? Right, okay. That's the basis of it. Actually, it's just a renewal. The only thing different about it is that it's 0.5 million more now than it was in 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. And I think that we'd all probably support any efforts to make ourselves more agile when it comes to purchasing housing and addressing some of the issues you've just been talking about. Cabinet, do you have any comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Councillor Kerr?
I very much support this scheme, but I just wanted to draw Cabinet's attention to the climate implications diagram, which is very green, which is probably more of a reflection of the aim of the build rather than actually of the decision or of the principle of building, because there will be quite a large carbon cost to doing building, however well we build them. And that is not reflected in this really at all. So it's just a word of warning, a word of warning. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, if you could form a question, preferably Councillor Kerr, rather than an observation, but that would be helpful. Thank you. I'll move to the Executive Scrutiny Board recommendation, which says, the Executive Scrutiny Board resolved to ask Cabinet and officers to identify a way to make the use of this delegation public knowledge without the need for a freedom of information request. I've had a conversation with officers about this, and in terms of putting delegated decisions into reports, that already happens. It's put into the quarterly financial monitoring report, of which we have one today. And obviously the public can view that. However, I do acknowledge that it's limited in detail. So it's there for transparency, obviously. In terms of this particular report, I know that we've asked for communication between the Housing Department and Comms, and that's been happening. So Karen, who's here today, she does provide regular press updates to the team about the programme of completions. So that's that specifically. But if the Exec Scrutiny Board was asking for delegated decisions to be made clearer in the public realm and with more detail, then I think we can take that away and have a look at it at least. It's a shame the chair's not here, because I could probably ask him what he meant. But I know that with EMCA, whenever they have a board meeting, at the end of their papers, they have a section about delegated decisions. And it is over a certain amount, because, if you listed every single one of them, it would be very, very long. But at the very least, we can look into how they've done it there and see if that's something that we might look to introduce. Yeah, Emily?
So an exercise for delegation, which is delegated by Cabinet through this report, should be recorded on a delegated approval form. A report is made on that when an officer exercises the delegation under a Cabinet report, and is shared with relevant Cabinet members. You'll be well aware of them. You will have been consulted on them before. So my expectation would be that when this delegation is exercised, Karen's team would be completing one of those reports. They'll be shared with Democratic Services. So there's an easy method of collating them and then reporting back on a regular basis into Exec Scrutiny if they wished, if that was the relevant place for them to go.
Thank you for that. So I guess the response is we will look into it. And if we could minute that, perhaps the Democracy team will assess the best way to share that information. Okay, thank you very much. So then we move to the recommendations, which are 2.1 to 2.4. Are we all agreed? Thank you very much. Move on to item 10, which is the Q2 financial monitoring. And over to Councillor Kozlowski.
Thank you, Chair. So as you'd expect, quite a detailed report, and thank you to the officers for producing that. I'll aim to give a brief summary of all of the areas of the report. Naturally, it's full of numbers and pound signs, but stick with me. Firstly, with regards to revenue, the Q2 forecast revenue position is £0.526 million overspend. For context, this is less than 1% of the £350 million net revenue budget of the Council. This overspend, although a minor pressure, is a result of setting a robust budget in February, which recognised the pressures facing the Council. This pressure of just over £500,000 is being reviewed to establish mitigations to enable either minor or no drawdown from reserves at outturn in March. The main changes from Q1 to Q2 are predominantly in relation to increasing demand for children's and adult social care services. These emerging pressures have been mitigated in the main from other council-wide underspends. The Council continues to review expenditure and apply, where appropriate, various mitigating actions to manage the outturn within the available budget and reduce any impact on reserves. The Council's continued focus on rebuilding reserves and achieving long-term financial sustainability is part of a broader strategy to ensure financial resilience. This approach involves not relying on reserves to balance the budget and replenishing reserves where possible, which is crucial for maintaining financial health with the challenges that we face. General fund balances at the end of Q2 are £15.818 million, which is 4.52% of the net revenue budget. And I'm pleased to report that all of the savings agreed for this financial year are forecast to be delivered. I'll move on to capital. For capital, there is a forecast variance of just £46,000 against the original approved budget of £177.646 million. The capital section also makes requests for approval for the addition of a new scheme to the capital programme of £3 million, and that's for works improvements for the junction at Merrill Way, the A514 and Bolton Lane. This is profiled at £1.6 million in 25-26, 1.4 in 26-27. This is funded from NCA grant with details outlined in the section 4.3.110. 10. There is also the addition of a new scheme to the capital programme of £242,000 for street cleansing vehicles funded from Derby Homes. And finally, approval to recommend to Council the update to the Council's capital strategy. There's nothing significant to report on the HRA. As at Q2, it is forecast on target to contribute £1.369 million to the reserve for business as usual activity. And I'll move on to dedicated schools grant. In summary, the budget set for 25-26 reported a forecast in-year deficit of £6.56 million, resulting in a forecast cumulative deficit of £21.311 million. The forecast position at Q2 has increased by 1.235 million to 7.795 million. The government's extension of the DSG statutory override has now been extended to April 2028. That affords us the short-term financial flexibility needed for authorities as they implement sustainable change, underpinned and reinforced by the government's longer-term reforms. The deficits for DSG are not held on the Council's balance sheet, they are held nationally, and we're awaiting further information on proposals around that. The challenges we face are not unique to Derby. Councils across the country are facing the same budget pressures for the same reasons, and the root cause is years of underfunding for local government. We've been working hard to mitigate this through responsible financial management, and our strategy is working. We anticipated a slight overspend when setting a realistic budget back in February, and we have a plan in place, whilst continuing to invest more than £40 million into essential services. Crucially, our continued focus on financial sustainability means we are managing these challenges without relying on reserves to balance the budget. Over the past decade, Derby, like many other councils, has experienced a significant increase in demand for services, such as adult social care. Spending has risen by £101 million, with £60 million of this increase occurring since 2021. The government is currently proposing a change in the way that councils are funded through their fair funding reforms. The proposals aim to simplify the system, move to multi-year funding allocations and align funding with need. The new system, which would take effect from April 2026 if confirmed, would also address long-term disparities in funding between councils, meaning that money would be directed to areas such as Derby with high deprivation, population growth and a low tax base. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kozowski. This is, on the whole, it's a really encouraging report, isn't it? And when you consider that our administration has set 2 budgets and we've got to this position within our second year of replenished reserves and not needing to draw down on them, however, even if we needed to, at least we know they're there in the first place, is really, really encouraging. Knowing our reserves are up from less than 3%, which we inherited, to 4.52 is ahead of what we had anticipated as well. So I'm really encouraged. I just wanted to ask Alison to comment, if she would, and give us some reassurance about the PFI deficit.
Our PFI schemes aren't due to come to an end yet. For the first one, I think is at least 5 years, and some of them are over 10 years. We do have a number of PFI schemes. It's business as usual that we do an evaluation of the affordability of those PFI schemes during the course of the financing. They're subject and influenced by interest rates going up and down over the course. So it's not unusual to be in this position, and at this point in time, I don't have any concerns about those.
Thank you. That's just what I wanted to hear, really, that it's not unusual, that this happens, and it's all par for the course with these long-term situations. Right, any questions? Councillor Hazelgrave.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to draw people's attention to, in the report 4.19 on page 5 of this report and 51 of the bundle. It's about children's placement pressures. I'd like us to look at the human story behind the £1.5 million projected £1.516 million overspend here, as set out in the budget. Behind this, you need to understand that our outstanding social services for children have been working and doing absolutely everything they can to keep those children at home. But there comes a point where, a decision has to be made and the hand of the authority is forced, and those children become our children, looked after, and we are the corporate parents of that, as councillors, and many, if not all, officers of the council are. I've not gone into the full situation. I don't need to know the full situation and the reasons why. I'm staying strategic, but I know that it was not just 1 or 2 children, but a number of children that had to be taken at the same time from a family and put into our care. What we could not do in such a traumatic event for those children is split them up. We had to put them together so they could take stock together and comfort each other. We could then ascertain what would be the best setting for those children long term. When we know our children well, we know what the best setting is, whether it's adoption, whether that's too far a step at the moment, whether it's foster care, or whether some of them need to be in a children's home. And if all of them do, that's a big ask, and that's going to be expensive. What we will be doing over the years, or our colleagues in social services will be doing, our social workers, they'll be trying to make sure that they get the best fit for those children so that the cost is brought down, but it's also the ideal setting for those children. So I'm optimistic that, but can't guarantee that we will be trying to lower the costs of their care to us, but only in a safe way and an appropriate way for them in the condition that they are in, having faced tremendous trauma. And that might be trauma on trauma because of what was going on in the family before that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hazelgrave. I think it's important to understand what lies beneath the figures and the pound signs. Okay, thank you. If there's no other comments, I'll ask Councillor Kerr if you had any questions.
I do. I have a question about paragraph 4.6.9, which is another question. It's another point about children. And it's asking a question about whether underspends are always good news. In that it reports here £250,000 that hasn't been spent on disadvantaged 2-year-olds. We must have known those children exist, so they probably haven't been gaining the benefit of that provision. And what are therefore the implications for early intervention or identifying SEND needs for the beginnings of their more formal education? And what are we doing as a result of that knowledge?
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I mean, it does say in the report that the underspend is due to lower numbers than first planned. So we put a number into a budget because we anticipate how many children will be needed to be cared for, but then there are less. So
these children haven't presented themselves for early years education, so they are still with families at home, one presumes, or else they may be in private thing.
I think that question might be a step too far for any officers in here today, because we don't have any papers with any officers in the room that would be able to cover early years. 4.6.9. We can only answer it from a financial perspective, I would suggest, today.
Yeah, I can offer a little bit of context. So the early years block is a little bit different to the other blocks within the DSG in that it's based on participation and uptake. So when we're given the budget from the DFE, there's an assumption of the numbers, and then a census is taken, and then that is then clawed back based on that census. So that element is based on participation. As to why those numbers are lower than the original assumptions in the DFE, I can't answer that, Councillor Kerr, but it is the unique element of the early years grant within that funding stream.
Can we assume also, Alison, that it can't be transferred elsewhere? No. Okay, thank you. Councillor Hazelgrave.
Just to add to that, clearly what we'd love to see is all families that could put their children into a nursery or some setting like that where they meet other toddlers is ideal, but parents have a choice. And if parents don't want to do that, they may have a childminder, or they may get together with some other families and employ a childminder. We can't do anything about that. I think we do all we can in terms of comms to publicise, the government as well, so that the offer is there, and our family hubs are doing their job as well there. And obviously all those people who deal with newborn infants and the parents and their newborn child, so they can look at the future and what milestones there would be for them. Hopefully, as the message goes out and word of mouth between parents, you know, I've sent my child to a nursery, it's not costing me this, or I've got so many hours free care, then it might attract other people. Because sometimes people take the word of mouth of other parents but more than authority, etc. So maybe next year we'll have less of a clawback because the uptake isn't as high as we would have liked or was predicted. But I think it's a really valid question. But the funding is, if the places aren't taken up, we can't devote that money to other things. We have to give it back to the DFE.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelgrave. Alison?
Just got some information from the service that just might give a little bit of context, well, just to give a bit of support to this. So the service is writing a paper on 0 to 4-year-olds, which will cover the low numbers for the 2-year-olds, and that will be at scrutiny on the 8th of December. So some more information is coming in the system for that process.
Well done on getting that information so quickly. That's very good news. Right, lovely. More to come. Okay, so recommendations are 2.1 to 2.2. Are we all supportive? Thank you very much. Oh, beg your pardon, I didn't go to the executive scrutiny report recommendation because it was just resolved to note the report. So that's why I didn't do it. Item 11, preparing a new local plan for Derby, draft plan consultation. That's back to Councillor Khan.
I'll volunteer. This report basically recommends that the draft local plan is approved for consultation for a period of 8 weeks beginning in January 2026. It's a continuation of the previous administration's cabinet, which on the 8th of December 2021, they recommended that we start looking at this, right? So the consultation on the plan is essential to gather responses, make changes in time for the second consultation, the submission plan consultation, which must take place in late summer next year, so that a sound plan can be submitted by the government deadline of December 26. The new local plan sets the planning framework for Derby between 2023 and 2043, which is 20-year span, which is longer than the previous one, to address the city's development needs, working with neighbouring councils to consider the surrounding areas. Obviously, there's going to be some impact from LGR on this when it happens, but at least we're prepared from our side. The new plan is required to allocate more land for housing development to offer the city a 5-year supply of housing land, to review the policies relating to the city centre and regeneration. In terms of publicity, this is the first opportunity for the public and stakeholders to view and comment on the draft plan, on the draft of the local plan. The plan contains housing needs, how much, where, and what type, employment and economic development, the future of Derby City Centre, how to conserve and enhance the historic environment, transport, infrastructure, and community facilities, environmental protection, and climate resilience, and how planning decisions are made and managed. I won't read all of it because it's over 400 pages. We'll be here till very late in the evening, I think. But in sort of short, that's what it's there for. We all know we've been talking about it for nearly 4 years, so it's here finally. And before I forget, I'd like to thank Karen and Ian for their reports on the emergency framework and also for the affordable housing schemes item, and to thank Paul, his team, and everyone involved in the preparation of this report. It makes War and Peace look like a Ladybird book, you know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. I think the one thing you didn't point out as well is that the cross-party working group that has come together to help formulate this plan. So it's not our plan, as in our administration, it is our council's plan. And Councillor Dinser probably wants to comment, as he was one of the people sitting on that cross-party working group.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I think it's been a labour of love, and I really want to thank the officers for working with the cross-party working group to let us have the information, receive our input, and take them into account. So I think, generally speaking, Councillor Kerr is here as another member of the working group, the cross-party working group. The officers were very diligent in making sure full information was made available to us and that we could make our contributions. And I would say, mostly, if not 100%, there was consensus within the working group in terms of what they sort of looked at and what they sort of approved within this plan.
Did you just want to name drop the rest of the cross-party working group? You mentioned Councillor Kerr and yourself.
Yeah, Paul will correct me if I'm wrong, but we had representation, Lucy from Liberal Democrats, myself and Sue Bonser from Labour, and from Reform we had Councillor Prosser and Councillor Holmes from the Conservatives.
Thank you very much. Paul, did you want to say anything?
Sorry, Phil Ingle, independent representative as well.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is just the early stage of the local plan. This is embryonic, if you want to view it like that. For decision making, for planning committee, it's the start of the process. It doesn't have much weight, but we need to get the buy-in from residents and other stakeholders. And we will be doing publicity drive to drop-ins end of January, beginning of February, on a Saturday for people to come and talk to us. But it's about getting people to respond back. This is our view as officers and as members. What does the public feel? Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
If there's no other comments from Cabinet, Councillor Kerr, did you have any questions?
Two questions. One is whether Cabinet feels that there's been enough notice given to the comments that the public made in the pre-consultation, which was about 18 months ago, and presented an initial level of opinion from the public. And secondly, whether there is opportunity that will be taken to publicise the local plan at the same time as the information about the changes to recycling, which a similar cohort of people within the city might be interested in. And we may be able to piggyback events together.
Okay, so in response to your first question, is 18 months enough notice? I would suggest, yeah.
The consultation was 18 months ago. which people commented in, but has enough attention being paid to those comments in the formation of this plan?
Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I follow your line. I would say yes, in as much as we've taken on board comments, and this is the first time we've got something concrete that reflects those comments. It may not reflect comments, but this is the first time to test that. This is the litmus, getting out there to talk to people. That's why it's an 8-week consultation, and officers at the back of the room here are going to be spending from March onwards through the summer assessing those responses and bringing them together, whether we agree with them or not, to a further plan, further consultation, which then goes off to the Secretary of State, hopefully.
So the answer is yes. Thank you very much. As for the other one, I'm not a comms expert. I don't know whether you should mix these things or not, but I'm sure that our comms experts will look and consider your suggestion. Now, I move to the Executive Scrutiny Board recommendation, which says, resolved to ask Cabinet to strengthen the housing principle that came out of the 2024 public consultation on the sequential use of land for housing. This to be done by the introduction of an additional housing policy stating that housing development should be regeneration-led and that green and grey belt and green wedges should consequently gain further protection. This should be included in the Regulation 18 plan consultation, with the final wording to be approved by the Chair of Planning and relevant Cabinet member. That's very specific, and because of that, I'm going to defer to Paul to help us answer that. Thank you.
I will try. Thank you, Chair. I think in response, there's a lot of pages in the plan, in the document. Don't expect everybody to have read everything. It's a dip in, dip out. In response, paragraph 4.12 of the plan says that in order to meet our growth needs, the strategy in the plan has adopted a brownfield and city centre first approach when considering the best locations for new build development during the allocation of site selection. And obviously planned development, whilst acknowledging that sustainable sites on greenfield land will also be required to meet the scale of housing required. So we've already done what the recommendation said. However, I think there's probably opportunity that in draft policy HE1, which talked about windfall sites, those sites that aren't allocated that come forward, we could have a form of wording which promotes windfall sites that are brownfield first and not greenfield, so that we actually promote a skewed approach, if you like, to having brownfield on windfall. And with Cabinet's agreement, Councillor Khan and I could come up with a form of wording into that policy, if you so wish.
For me, I think that this sort of detail probably should have come out in the cross-party working group, because it could have been worked in a lot earlier. And here at Cabinet, it's not really the right place to be accepting something quite so detailed and nuanced. I think that as the cross-party working group hasn't been the opportunity or the vehicle to do that, that I'd suggest that this is put into the consultation. And so then it will be considered properly by officers and by the Cabinet member going forwards. So, as Paul said, this is the opportunity to input into this and shape it. So I think that feeding into the consultation would be the best avenue. So with that, although, I'm rejecting the recommendation, it's just purely because I don't think it's the right route. Okay, and so with that, bear with me, I go to the recommendations, 2.1 to 2.2. Are we all in agreement? Thank you very much, Cabinet. And the last item is the Q2 performance report, and I'm presenting this paper. So I'm very pleased to present this Q2 performance report to my colleagues for your consideration. Over the quarter, our colleagues and partners have worked collaboratively to deliver against the commitments that we made within the Council Delivery Plan 2025 to 26. The progress has been positive, and I'll share some of the key highlights. Under inclusive, 63% of children in care were placed within 20 miles of their original address, which is our highest percentage for several years, and we know brings better outcomes. In addition, 100% of education, health and care plans were issued within the 20-week timescale this quarter, which is incredible progress. Under green, the reused Rainsway shop at the Rainsway Household Waste and Recycling Centre has become a permanent feature in August. Shoppers can now find a wide range of pre-loved goods, including toys, books, tools, furniture, home decor, kitchenware and electricals, which promotes sustainability in our city. Of course, it's not just that they are pre-loved, but actually we're rescuing them from being disposed of. So it really is upcycling at its finest. Under growth, 102 jobs were successfully created and safeguarded following business and organisation support provided by the Council, linked to the Ascend programme and UK Shared Prosperity Fund. We also hosted a series of Derby Promise events which provided opportunities for young people in the city. Under Vibrant, more than 7,000 people enjoyed this year's Derby Fest Day performances in the Cathedral Quarter of the city centre. We are also continuing to support city centre vibrancy, with Osnabrück Square officially reopened to the public in August, and the new Chapel Street Arts Centre, which is absolutely thriving under our guidance. And as a connected council, we have worked with neighbouring councils to deliver proposals for local government reorganisation, as considered by council last week, which included an extensive public consultation. Overall, I am delighted that 94% of our objectives in our delivery plan are on track, with some good progress in major projects across all our priority themes. Highlights in terms of performance measures and risks are shown in the report, with a full overview of performance found at Appendix 1. As an administration, we take performance seriously and we continue to review progress closely as we move forward. Do I have any comments on the report from my cabinet members? Councillor Nwaha.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say a huge thank you for the team, especially those at the Real Shop at Rainsway, for not just buying into the vision of that establishment, but also making sure that it can match any other shop that you can see in the city centre. Recently, I've gotten a fantastic multi-gear bike that was shockingly in good condition. It's amazing sometimes what people throw away. Or, but in places like this, you would find that you can give some of these items a second home, and they'll be of much utility to you, as it were, to the original owner. I also just want to say a huge kudos to the parks team. 6 of our parks retaining the Green Flag award is an amazing achievement, and of course we want to carry on not just maintaining that but surpassing that in the future to ensure that at least all parks in Derby. But it's what we've seen in this report is not just a collaborative effort between cabinet and other councillors and the officers, but also a buy-in from residents that have seen these achievements come forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nwaha. Councillor Swan.
Yeah, I just want to echo some of that. I mean, I think personally there have been so many good projects that we've initiated, we've completed, and I think everyone in this room will probably be very proud of something. So I'm particularly proud of the living pillars and the greening of the city. We've got bird boxes in the city, we've got planters that are creating biodiversity, we've planted trees. And when you look at this city from 2 years ago, in fact, I cannot wait to do a time lapse, because I know that we're already making huge improvements that people are on noticing. And I hope that we can just continue with the work that we're doing in the way that we're doing it. And again, thanking the officers for enabling us to do that. But I think it's a really exciting time. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swan. Yeah, I've spoken to many people who have come back to the city after a couple of years and can't believe the difference. And I think sometimes when you're living here, you don't notice the small incremental changes, but when you hear it from someone that's not seen or been here for a while, it's when you really realise the impact that it's having. Thank you. Councillor Heselgrave.
Thank you, Chair. You've already drawn attention to the inclusive city key highlights, but I would add that on that front, also to remind people that the Derby Youth Justice Service got an outstanding from Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Probation. Did I say her? My apologies, it's through, God knows, 50 years of habit, if not more. And no disrespect to His Majesty, of course. It's the first YGS in the country to be rated outstanding in every category, and I know that it is seen as a kind of beacon and almost a handbook for other authorities to follow in terms of this. It gives us tremendous reassurance as citizens of the city that young offenders are helped to make sure their first crime is their last, but also that our victims, any victims of those crimes, are really well supported. And it helps the young person who has offended to understand the impact of what they have done and makes them less likely to reoffend. Also, one thing that wasn't drawn to your attention was the very bottom page where it talks about 3 and 4, every year 3 and 4 pupils in Derby will benefit from free learn to ride sessions, so that no child leaves primary school without being able to ride. Now, I think that's a really important thing, and I think it's linked to active travel, but also active schools. If we've got young people who can leave their primary school, all of them able to ride a bike, many of them before that, much not younger than that, I hope, then they may, you know, start to actually travel, certainly if they're primary school, which is in a fairly close locality, and lots of cycle routes and increasing numbers of cycle routes are being provided, so they're safe. And if parents have the confidence to let their children do that and know that they're coming back, going there and coming back safely, that's great for those young people to have that start to the day rather than being ferried by their parents. Yeah, and all those cars that we know cause an immense issue at every school in the country and probably in the world these days, certainly in the developed world. So I think it's a really great achievement to have this and to be trailblazers in it in terms of the nation. It's a really good start for young people. And it's also one of those milestones. You know, we all remember milestones in our lives. The first time we were able to whistle. Yes? Yeah. The first time we were able to swim. Yeah. The first, maybe less. The first time we were able to learn to ride a bike, yeah? and that's one of them. They're milestones, they're an achievement, and there's something that we have for the rest of our lives. Once you've learned to ride your bike, there you go. If you live 5 years between riding it, you get on, and within seconds you're off again. So I think it's a really tremendous thing for the city to embark on. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Heselgrave. And just like you never forget how to ride a bike, you never forget how to whistle. Councillor Chambers.
Oh, I'm on. I'll keep it short and sweet. I think it'd be really dismissive of me not to mention libraries. The work that's gone in over the last couple of months by every single officer that is involved in libraries has been incredible, and I thank each and every one of them. Only yesterday, Chaddisden saw 170 visitors through the door, which is something that's really unheard of. And that's testament to what the volunteers are doing. I need to give a shout out to the volunteers because they've taken the vision and they've thought, how can we get more people through the door? What different groups can we do? What different sessions can we do? How can we generate some income? And they've really got on board with it. There's a lot to do, but we're definitely going in the right direction. So I just wanted to give a big shout out because I'm sure I've caused a few sleepless nights with some officers with my demands, but it's all coming together. So, yeah, thank you to all of those.
Thank you. Councillor Dinser.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of AI, I think there's progress been mentioned before, and really, we'll come to that later. But I want to just highlight two things, which is on council tax collection and business rate collection. Both are green and on the way up. The council tax collection is in this quarter, because of the focus on this and the automation used and some hard work done by our officers on the ground, we've increased our council tax collection at this point of Q2 by 0.2%. Now, that might not seem a lot, but every 1% is £1.1 million more for our income. And in terms of the business rate, that's actually increased by 1.37. Both are green, and that 1.3% is quite a hefty contribution to our budget. And I'm sure this sort of information is contributing to the report we had earlier about financial situation and how our savings targets are being 100% met, and also our sort of deficit in terms of where we are, which is at $500,000, next to minimal. So I think this reflects, this piece of work, and the green arrows on these two performance indicators reflects the hard work being done by officers and the unleashing of automation and early contact with business rate payers and more recently council tax payers to enable them to pay in a timely manner, which means a benefit to us and a benefit to them.
Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, Councillor Kerr, do you have a question? Okay, thank you very much. The Executive Scrutiny Board resolved to recommend that Cabinet ensure robust measures continue to be put in place to significantly mitigate the risk on cyber security, and that a report back to Executive Scrutiny on progress is provided. I'll pass over to Heather just to feedback on that.
Hi there. I've spoken with Andy Brummel, our Director of Digital, and he is very happy to provide further information on this. I think, as I explained at the time, we do report regularly into audit and governance around all of the strategic risks. Cyber is clearly, up there in terms of being one of the most serious ones that we're aware of, and there's, considerable controls and mitigation in place. But Andy Brummel is happy to spend more time with members of executive scrutiny, explaining that perhaps on a private basis, just due to the risks involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. And this is something that we as a Cabinet actually discussed when we were reviewing these papers. And, the fact that in this performance monitoring that cyber threat continues to be, right at the very top of the risk register is not a reflection of how of our protections. It's a reflection of the fact that the risk always will remain high. And I think that's the difference, isn't it? We did wonder whether it should be lowered, because actually we are so robust in our protections, and and it's recently been tested, as I understand, as well. And it was found to be, really, really high standard, excellent standard. So we were reassured, but I can completely understand why the Executive Scrutiny Board would also want to understand more of that reassurance. So happy to accept that recommendation. Okay. And with that, I'll turn back to the recommendations, which are 2.1 to 2.2. Do we all accept? Thank you very much. And then bang on the dot, 3 p.m, we are concluded. Thank you very much, Cabinet, and thank you, officers, for attending this afternoon. Good to see you all. Good afternoon.